What if I told you it's just as easy to build and maintain a business at $10 million as it is a business at $1 million? Well, in this video, I'm gonna show you the 7 reasons businesses stall out at $1 million and how to finally break through. So I've helped about 38,000 people from just about every country on the planet build businesses, and the ones who make it to $1 million, 90% end up stalling out and never getting above there. So how this works is that if we say the vertical axis is, the amount of revenue your business does per year in millions of dollars, and this is time, a lot of people bust their butts to get from 0 to $1 million. That part there, from all this experience I've had building my own businesses and helping others, is just hustle. That is 100% just you, because you can take a mediocre product to $1 million in sales. You don't need a team, you don't need a lot of traffic sources, you don't need hardly anything to get from 0 to $1 million. That's just you following a process, hustling and grinding every single day. Things get a little trickier once you get somewhere between $1 and $3 million, because that's where strategy matters a little bit more. So what ends up happening is people think what got them to about $1 million is going to get them to $10 million, but they need different skill sets. And there's 7 reasons that I'm going to go into of why businesses end up stalling out right there and how to finally break through. Because what's going to happen, and I've seen this happen for too many people, they get to this level, they're at $1 to $3 million or so, and they're not really free yet because their business isn't making that much money. They're a full-time entrepreneur, but they don't have the freedom that they really wanted to. And so they end up getting stuck. And so hopefully at some point they can sell their business if they get out in time. But what happens more often than not is they build and build and build, and then they get tired, and then their business just ends up declining because they're worn out. They don't want to add more products. They don't want to figure more things out. More hungry, younger competitors in this stage are now competing with them. And so their business eventually just dies a slow death. And so I don't want that to happen to you. I want you to be one of the people who gets to this level, and then you see your business climb through 5 million, 10 million, and really as big as you want, because life actually gets easier once you get to that $10 million mark. So let's get into the 7 reasons why businesses stall out at $1 million and how to finally break through. So the first reason is they sell a niche product. So I at one point was talking with the nice older couple that makes this thing. So this is a pop gun. So if I pull this thing back, that's basically what this thing does. I remember seeing these things at a mall that I went to when I was probably like 7 years old and probably begged my parents to buy one. So I was talking with a couple that sold these products. I believe this is their actual brand. I just bought this on Amazon for the video, and they were doing well. They were dominating this market. They were the #1 seller on Amazon, the #1 seller on Google. Like, they own the pop gun market. The problem was nobody buys pop guns. Nobody wants these things. Kids want video games. And so this nice older couple had no way to grow this business. They were already owning the market. And so the first thing you want to do to get out of this trap is to not sell a niche product. Everyone tells you to go into niches. That's great to get from 0 to $1 million, but if you want to get from $1 million to 10 million to even bigger, you've got to get out of the niches. And so what you want is you want a big market, but then you want to carve out your own little piece. So for us, we sell coffee. We started in this massive coffee market, which is one of the biggest markets in the world. But we found an angle within that market, which is to sell low acid coffee. And so that allowed us from this small, narrow base of just people who wanted low acid coffee, because coffee can jack up your stomach, especially if you're a little bit older. So we were able to get space in that little market of this big market, but then we were able to keep expanding. And today, even though we'll do probably $65 million in revenue this year, we still have a lot of room to expand, because not only is our coffee lower acidity, but it's also one of the healthiest coffees on the planet. And that's why we made this product, was really for ourselves. And so now we can expand into this bigger segment of that market, which is just people who want to live more healthily and are willing to pay a premium for that. And so the reason you may be stuck at this level is because you may be selling a niche product that just not that many people want to buy. So instead, look for a big market, $100 million market, possibly even bigger, and then find an angle within that market that can help you expand. Even Apple, way back in the day, started with a smaller segment of the massive computer market before expanded and basically became sort of a mass consumer product. You want to do the exact same thing. Enter a big market, but find your smaller angle. And that's how you win, and that's the first step to scaling bigger. So reason number 2, businesses stall out at around the $1 million mark, is they sell a me too commoditized product. And so the test I always love to give people is I call it the coffee shop test. Imagine you're sitting at a coffee shop across from your ideal customer for the product you sell or the product that you want to sell. How would you convince that person who you assume knows all the competitors out there, they know all the products, they know all the features? What would you tell that person to convince them to buy your product? If you don't have an answer, then you don't have a great product. And so an example of this is like a single ingredient supplement product. So this is literally just zinc. And so I've talked with a lot of people, especially Amazon sellers, that are, have built good products for Amazon, but that whole model is totally different and is a lot harder to scale to $10 million versus your typical direct-to-consumer Shopify-focused brand like the one that we built, which 60% of our sales are on Shopify. If you want to do that, you can't sell this kind of product. Because what are you going to do? When you advertise this using Facebook ads, for example, or influencers or affiliates or any other sort of content, you're going to tell people, hey, zinc is so amazing. You should go buy zinc. And then what are they going to do? If you don't have a strong reason for them to buy your product, they're going to be like, sweet, like you've convinced me, I'm going to go buy zinc. So I'm going to go to Amazon and I'm going to buy the cheapest one I can find. That's not the position you want to be in. So when selling any sort of product, you've got to get out of the commoditized positioning. And so even for us, we're technically in a commoditized market, which is coffee, but we give people every reason possible why they must buy our coffee. And so there's a great copywriter who wrote a book called The 16-Word Sales Letter. And so the very first reason of 10 or 10 questions that you're supposed to answer if you're following this copywriting framework is, how is this different than everything else that I've seen? That's what you must be able to answer for your product. Otherwise, nobody's going to buy it. And that gets you out of this commoditized space. And if you don't have an answer for that, it's time to go back to the drawing board, either with your marketing, you just need to make your marketing more interesting, or with the actual product. And that's the second reason that people stall out at this level. And by solving it, by getting out of the commoditized product space, you're able to scale to $10 million or more. So the third reason is you're trying to capture demand instead of create it. So when I built my first e-commerce business starting back in 2009, I got traffic from Google. People had to actually be searching for keywords. They either found me through organic rankings, which just meant non-paid, and then eventually I added paid advertising, but it was all search-based. That meant people had to be searching for those keywords to find my products. Then I used that same skill to grow on Amazon, which worked great for a while. The problem with that model is you end up being basically a slave to the platform. They control your whole life. This is why we've heard forever with people building online businesses. They're like, oh man, there was a Google update and it crushed my business. Amazon suspended my product, crushed my business. That's because your whole business is based on capturing demand instead of generating demand for your brand and your products. And so what you want to do is you first want to make sure you have a product that is interesting enough, or you talk about it in a way that's interesting enough to go out there and generate demand. And if you don't have something interesting you can say about your product, either you got to say something different and come up with something, or you just need to find a different product. Because when you are able to create demand, you get to control your destiny as a business owner. And now the best way to grow sales for any business, probably even from 0 to 1 million, but especially 1 to 10 million plus, is using platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, any of these paid advertising platforms, YouTube as well, or on the organic side. But they're all based on you being able to create an interesting piece of content, either a natural piece of content that's posted on the platform, or a piece of content that just happens to be used as an ad to accelerate your results. A piece of content interesting enough that you can put it in front of somebody, letting them do the heavy lifting of finding those people, but you can put it in front of somebody that's never heard of you before, and that person being interested enough to want to click to your website and buy. This is exactly how we scaled our business Life Boost was we were able to create ads, run them on Facebook that were interesting enough just to general coffee drinkers where they wanted to go to our page and buy our actual coffee. And so the next step in your process is to start creating demand rather than hoping that it exists out there and hoping you can siphon off just a little piece. And that starts with coming up with a unique and interesting and compelling reason to buy your product, and also to have a product that's interesting enough to talk about, that you can put a piece of content in front of thousands or millions of people that have never heard from you before, and now they want to buy your product. So the fourth reason, which is going to be a little hard for some people to hear, is you're not facing reality. And so I've seen this so many times with business owners that are at the low seven figures mark, is they've grinded and they've hustled and they've built their business, maybe even for a decade, but if nothing else, for multiple years. They've gotten to this point and they know in the back of their head that this business, this product is not going to get them where they want to go. And they don't face reality though. They just keep hustling and grinding and hoping a miracle happens. What you want to do at this stage is likely just face reality yourself. But if you have trouble doing that, start getting advice from somebody who's been where you want to go. This could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be an advisor, a mentor, a coach, whatever. Ask them for feedback on your situation. Say, hey, my goal is to build a $10 million business or 20 or 30 million or whatever your goal is, to be able to retire and live free. And depending on your goal, here's my business today. Here are the facts. Here's the products. Here's the channels. Here's the customers. Here's what people think about all this stuff. Here's my profitability. Is what I'm doing now going to get me there? 9 times out of 10, it's not. Otherwise, you would already be there. Something needs to change. Either you need to grow, your product needs to grow, your marketing channels need to grow. Something needs to change. So I find a lot of business owners, because we kind of have this sort of sunk cost idea where I've put all this time and effort into it and I just got to keep doing that and that's going to get me where I want to go. Where you may really need to change something. You may need to throw something away, throw your top product away, throw people that are no longer serving you away. Whatever it takes for you to sort of break through. Something is keeping you stuck right now, but it starts with facing reality. So the fifth reason businesses stay stuck at around the $1 million mark is they're so focused on building systems, because that's what everyone tells them that they need, instead of building people. And so when I was building my first business, I think at that point I was probably at $1 million a year in revenue, my first business ever, my e-commerce company. I was, at that point, like people almost expected you to do phone customer service and everything. So I was still doing the marketing, trying to learn the marketing because I didn't know anything at the time. And I was also answering the phone all day long because customers were calling, trying to figure out where their supplements were and that sort of thing. And I was like, I can't do anything else. I'm running out of time here. So I hired my first employee. His name was Kyle. I actually found him on Craigslist. And so the total profit of my business at that point was probably like $3,000 a month. So I hired Kyle and had to pay him like $2,000 a month, if not more. And so I basically was making no money at that time, but that was the only way to ever get out. It wasn't from building more systems. It wasn't from automating everything. It was from getting the right person at the right time. And I find a lot of business owners get stuck at the low seven figures mark because they're trying to build systems and documenting and doing SOPs and all that stuff. But what they really need is the right person in the right area of the business, most likely taking over the thing that they think they're really good at. And so for me, when we were building my first business that grew to really big, this was an e-commerce training company called amazing.com. At one point, we had hired a big team. They were doing everything in the business, but I ended up still spending like 8 hours of my day doing copywriting because I thought I was the only person who could ever do it. And it took going through 2 or 3 different copywriters to finally find somebody that I thought was good enough. When I finally got that person in the door, all of a sudden, my time went from 8, 9, 10 hours a day to like 1 hour a day, because that was taking up all of my time. And so I find a lot of business owners, they're stuck because they're not hiring the right people at the right time, especially higher level people. And so those people can free up, 80, 90% of your time. And then you have a decision to make, because at that point, you can probably step away and only work an hour a day. And while your business grows, if you have the right kind of person that's driven and motivated and properly incentivized, you don't really have to do anything. But if you want to keep pushing your business to higher levels of growth, and there's things you love to do in your business, maybe it's some marketing or product development, or you love being in touch with customers or building the team, whatever it is that you love to do in your business, now you don't have to do any of this other stuff and you can do only that thing. And that's how the best businesses in the planet grow to massive scale. Is you get this founder that's still incredibly motivated, incredibly ambitious, really wants to grow the business, but now they only do the thing that they're best at. So the best way to get to the next level of growth is to stop worrying so much about building systems and hire people that can build those systems for you and replace you in your company so you can do only what you love to do. So let's go back to the board. So the sixth reason is just a lack of confidence. So the first time I ever delivered a promotional webinar, which I had never done before, the guy who was an experienced affiliate, a very well-respected guy in the space that I just barely knew because he came from a connection with my business partner, the first thing he told me after I finished that webinar was that sucked, which was not exactly super motivating, but he was right. Basically, I had no idea how to deliver that kind of webinar, so the content I think was okay, but as far as producing sales at the end, that part was no good whatsoever. But I took that feedback, asked him how to improve, started studying the art of delivering promotional webinars, and I improved. And because I got better at that skill, that business, through webinars and launches, which are basically just turning the webinar into a series of videos, ended up doing over $100 million in sales. And so I built confidence by constantly iterating at that craft. And so I've met, I think, 5 billionaires now. And on a day-to-day basis, when you're meeting them, they're just normal people. There's basically nothing that they've done that you couldn't do from a personal skill or personal ability standpoint. But I find so many people that are at, call it the $1 to $3 million mark, that they just don't see in their head that they could build a $10 million, $50 million, $100 million business. I'm here to tell you that you absolutely can. And it all starts with what's in your head. There's no reason why you can't get to that level because other people have already done it. And their path, in most cases, is laid out for you. If you do some research on podcasts and articles, forget sort of admiring what they've accomplished. Study their path. What were the exact steps that they took? Take those steps and put them in place in your business. And quit thinking you can't do it, because I'm 100% confident that you can. There's a great book out there called Mindset by Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist. And basically the whole book's message is that people often underestimate other people, looking at other people and yourself, underestimate what you're capable of. We think a lot of things are just sort of natural talents and whatnot, and almost nothing is. Sure, somebody may be 7 feet tall and another person's 5 feet tall, but just about everything else, especially when it comes to accomplishment and things that take a long time, like building a business to $10 million plus, it all starts with you just believing in yourself that you can, finding other people that have already done it, and following the same exact path. Because there's a good chance you're going to end up roughly where they ended up as well. And so the seventh and final reason really brings us back to you starting a business in the first place. Why did you want to build a business? Sure, you want to make money, but there was likely a deeper purpose. There was something in your life, some vision you wanted to realize. And I find when people have spent years getting to this level, that just gets lost. Because they're just going through the motions. They're like, oh, I got to sell this product. I got to do this marketing. I got to run these ads. I got to hire these people. And they're just kind of grinding it out. They're trying to make a little bit more in profit, a little bit more in revenue. But why the hell are we doing all this stuff? So you want to start thinking about, what is the deeper reason for me building a business? I love this quote, and I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit from Richard Branson, but he basically says that a business is simply an idea to improve others' lives. And I know I've forgotten this a lot myself. I get so caught up in doing the marketing and conversion rate and lifetime value and average order value optimization and all this nerdy marketing stuff that I forget the whole point of a business is to improve others' lives. Because if you're selling a product that doesn't do that, you're not going to sell that much of that product. If you're over-promising and under-delivering on your marketing, your sales are going to tap out at some point, because the truth eventually comes to the surface. You find people that screw others over, and sometimes they win for a short period of time, but in the long run, they don't. And the people that are selling good products and doing good things and doing it for a good reason, which could be for your customers, could be for your employees, could be for somebody in your family, your kids, you want to have a better life, you've got to reconnect with the reason you wanted to build a business in the first place beyond money, because that ends up showing up in the performance of your company. Because especially once you get to this level, call it $1 to $3 million, you could be paying yourself a couple $100,000 a year, which in most cases, in most countries with most reasonable lifestyles, that's enough to live off on and be fairly comfortable. So what is going to be your motivation to get here? Because at that point, you've probably realized that it's not really about more money. More money is going to be nice, but it's only marginally going to increase your happiness and well-being. So it has to be something else, something about personal growth or contributing to others that you connect by getting to this level, that it's going to fulfill that purpose beyond what money can provide. So you have to reconnect with your purpose of building a business to begin with. So 90% of businesses that make it to $1 million end up stalling out there, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you know these 7 reasons and apply the solutions to break through all of them, you can be one of the few that makes it to $10 million and beyond. So if you're not subscribed already, subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm releasing content every single week that shows you everything I know about marketing and scaling businesses, and hopefully you save a lot of the hard lessons I've had to learn, and you're able to coast through a lot of this and achieve success way faster. I'll see you in the next video.